Hi, I'm Peter Tragos, host of the Lawyer You Know podcast and YouTube channel. The saying goes, everyone hates lawyers until you need one. Well, I'm here when you need one to answer your questions and give you insight that you didn't know you needed. Along with my partners, Pete Sardis, the professor, who has a finance and business background, and George Tragos, my dad, and the consigliere, a criminal defense giant, we can answer any questions you have. I'm just going to pull up a chair and have him join me because now... Oh, it was autocorrect, Beverly. Okay, that's okay then. Yeah. Yes, Mira has been guessing that it's Pete. Our Theranos Elizabeth Holmes expert is here, and we decided to match today for the video. We're both twinning it out. So, welcome to the Elizabeth Holmes discussion. On this case by case, we like to take each case individually and wrap a bow on at the end with questions. I'm sure you're going to have questions. Put them in the chat. We will get to them at the end. Because right now, I have some questions for Pete that I want to talk about. The show is out. I've seen the first episode and part of the second one. I haven't seen all of them, but I have watched a couple of Pete's breakdowns, which we are filming a breakdown and a kind of a reaction to each episode individually. Because again, we are going to post them next week. We're kind of banking a few because Pete and my kids are on vacation. So we will be out most, if not all, of next week. So we've recorded some extra ones, but I want to get some overarching thoughts just about. There have been some people that have said they've hated the what is it called, the Dropout. Mm-hmm. They've hated the show. They think it's so unrealistic. And after listening to some of your breakdowns, it looks like some parts of it you feel like are hitting home and are realistic, and then some are not, which you would expect in a Hollywood production.
The truth of the matter is, from a perspective of just being accurate about what happened, I think they're spot on. They've done a great job, but there's a reality. You're talking about years of events that they have to put into a miniseries and make it entertaining. So of course there's some creative license that they're taking there, but overall they've got it. They've got the facts right.
So as how they're kind of portraying everybody, do you think it has been fair or slanted towards or against Elizabeth Holmes, Balwani? What do you think kind of the slants are?
I think the slants, I will share with you kind of a spoiler on some of the stuff that's coming up. I think there's a big slant to make people look like fools, and these people are not fools. I think Sunny Balwani is portrayed to be a lot more of an effect on Elizabeth Holmes than I really think he is. I think that Amanda Seyfried has got Elizabeth Holmes down to a science, man. It's just on. And what I did is, and I thought this was cool, if you take the video clip of the real interview, for example, of Elizabeth Holmes, and then you put the Amanda Seyfried video down, put them side by side, they're spot on. Yeah. It's terrifyingly good.
Yeah, and I think she does a good job, and I think she seems super awkward and stuff in the show, which is, the point of it. So when we go through, and the really important thing about the show to me, and what I really want to focus on, because a lot of people want to talk about the Sunny Balwani trial, which is coming up, so we don't have exactly trial breakdowns to do, but what we do have in the R. Kelly case, in the Ghislaine Maxwell case, and now in this case, there are multiple widely viewed documentaries, shows, books, movies about a particular defendant and what's going on in their case. It's crazy to me that this trial is starting Monday, a few days from today. And we're basically, halfway through the Dropout series, right? They were four or 5 episodes or something. So explain how, as a criminal defense lawyer in a federal case, you deal with the fact that there are these huge, this is on Hulu. This isn't on, some website that you just, Hulu, I guess, is kind of a website, but this isn't some unknown place that this documentary, it's not some Sundance film, something, it's actually widely available. People are watching it. How is that going to affect jury selection and Balwani's trial?
Well, it's huge because the purpose here is to find a number of people, 12 plus 6 in Balwani's case, to sit and make a decision about guilt or innocence. So you have to know what the life experiences of those people are. And the first question is to be, who has seen The Dropout? Who has read the book Bad Blood? Who's listened to the podcast? Who's watched, all the stuff that's happened? And I'm guessing the majority of people in that area are going to raise their hand.
We have seen in other cases, specifically R. Kelly and their jury questionnaires, how they specifically ask, have you watched these documentaries? But then they also ask, how has it made you feel, or what has it give you any impressions about the defendant? Right. So if you were on that jury, let's just say, okay, and let's say you didn't know everything about the case, but you've just watched the show, what impression would it give you about Sonny Balwani? What would you write on your jury questionnaire?
Your impression would be, if you've seen it based on just watching The Dropout, you believe that Sonny Balwani is a very intelligent guy that wants to control everything. That's just what your perception is, because that's what you're seeing on the show. And
that's a great description, because I'm sure you haven't seen the ones in the R. Kelly case, but they literally wrote, he seems controlling, or he likes to have sex with young girls. That's what they said about R. Kelly. Shockingly, some of them ended up on the jury, which I just can't believe.
Because that makes a good plot line.
Right. So, and that's the point, is if this documentary makes them feel like he's in control, that's someone we would want to strike if we represented Sonny Balwani.
Absolutely.
Now, we would argue it's a cause challenge, because that was, Elizabeth Holmes basically said he was the controlling one. Right. He was the reason I did all of this. But I know also, just from talking to you in the office, you said that what feels more likely to you is a guy that's already super successful, invests $40 million. He doesn't invest that into a fraud. It's more likely that he invested it, it wasn't working quite as well, and they were like, fake it till you make it, let's make it work as we're kind of pushing it, right?
Right, which is exactly what some big names in other venture capital type investments have said and publicly admitted to, like the guys at Oracle. It didn't work. They just told people that it would, and by the grace of God, it did. Sonny Balwani is a guy that made $100 and something million company from nothing. He walked away with $40 million. It's my personal opinion that a guy like that doesn't walk into a fraud knowing it's a fraud. It just doesn't make sense. He'll just keep his $40 million and go somewhere else.
Right, but probably, like a lot of people would do, once he found out it was a fraud, he wasn't really ready to pull the plug and lose $40 million. He tried to make it work.
Right, because then he's got $13 million of his own dollars wrapped up in this thing. And again, it's part of the culture. Let's push it a little bit. It'll eventually work.
Do you know if any of them were consulted during the making of this? I mean, I assume they couldn't give too much.
Yeah, I don't think Elizabeth or Sonny Balwani were consulted. If they were, I'm sure they reached out and their lawyer said, absolutely not, we're not going to be part of this. But I'm certain that they actually spoke to some of the other people that are portrayed in the miniseries, because their testimony or their, I should say the information they gave to other media outlets is very consistent with what they did in the show.
What about anybody that was called as a witness during Holmes's trial, or that you think might be a witness during Balwani's trial? Are they portrayed in the show, and
I'm sure they will be.
Yeah,
I'm sure they will be. I think there will be some crossover witnesses, especially from the people in the lab, and I think that they are portrayed pretty consistent to what was in the testimony in the Elizabeth Holmes portion of the trial. Frankly, I think how long it takes to film this stuff, and just knowing what you do here, I bet a lot of this stuff was done before the Elizabeth Holmes trial actually finished.
Oh, it had. I would think it would have to be, but I do think it's interesting in that a show, you're able to portray what somebody knows and doesn't know, right?
Yeah.
But that's kind of the hard part in the trial. What did they know when they were saying things, and what were they trying to do? Because if you're trying to keep your company afloat by raising funds, and you're saying you're confident in what your people are creating in this product that's going to change the world, that's different than it's never going to work, but I want all this money, so I'm going to keep pushing this fraud.
But understand, because the Bad Blood book, the John Carew book, came out so far before the criminal trial began, a lot of those interviews have already been done. So you kind of knew where things were going, because, for example, there are some people that have gone out there and told the media, absolutely, this is what we knew at this point. This is what we told Elizabeth Holmes and Sonny Balwani. And they told us, get out of here. And they fired us. And they told us, you can never speak about this again.
Yeah. I do think it's really interesting, the timing of it, because this stuff has happened in other cases where politicians have made comments right before trials have started. Movies have come out, shows have come out, different, criminal acts have happened right before a trial that's similar, and you're just having to deal with all of this. And I really think it can change the dynamic of a trial. And we've had some federal trials where during jury selection, we've literally had to go one by one through jurors to talk about certain media attention and what they knew or didn't know about the case. In this case, similar to R. Kelly, which is one of the problems that I know you've read part of this motion, but what questions would you prepare to give to the judge? Because in federal cases, the judge is going to ask the majority, if not all, of the questions. What would you prepare to give to the judge in order to try to combat this documentary?
First thing is, you should know that the judge actually has plugged 2 days next week for the lawyers and the court to come together to figure out what those questions are going to be.
Yeah.
2 days. That's a lot of time. All right. And I would want to know what, media have you watched Does it affect your ability to be fair and impartial? Questions like, how do you think Sunny Balwani looks? What is your impression of the relationship between Sunny Balwani and Elizabeth Holmes? Who do you think is responsible for the decision-making at Theranos based on what you know now, since they don't have any evidence in front of them? There's a lot of questions. And I think, and this is just me, that the judge has got a lot of jurors in the background, because they're going to put these affidavits apparently together, not affidavits, questionnaires, and they're going to give them to the prospective jurors. And I think they're waiting for them to come back to review them, to make decisions carte blanche. These people are out.
They're going to strike people for cause before they ever show up.
Absolutely.
As I think they should, because that is more efficient.
Because you're also going to wind up tainting the people that are in the jury panel. If you have 10 people say, oh, I saw this and this is how I feel, then they're, no matter how you look at it, you're sitting in the room going, wow, forming an opinion, whether you like it or not. It's human nature.
And not to mention, 99% of the trials don't have documentaries that accompany them.
Yes,
so you can just move those jurors over to potentially sit on another trial where they'd be perfectly fine for, and ends up.
Sure.
Yeah. So, okay. Does anybody have any questions now on Elizabeth Holmes, on Sunny Balwani, on the trial, on the show? Put them in the chat. I am going to start with this one that I just saw pop up from Grant. Is anyone who says they've seen the show going to get struck? Why don't you answer that?
Yeah. Technically, just because you've seen it doesn't mean you're struck for cause. I think that if you've seen it, they're going to put you on a list to ask you specific questions about what you believe based on whether or not you are fair and impartial. Just because you saw it doesn't mean you're stricken.
The answer is no. Yeah, definitely not. Now, I don't really know. I think some people could have positive, because like after the first episode, I had some positive feelings about Sunny Balwani. Mm-hmm. Then it gets a little creepier, when she even says, I'm 17, why do you keep talking to me? I don't know how real that is, but I'm just saying from somebody on the outside watching, there is some chance for positive feelings toward Balwani, and saying maybe that they feel like Holmes is the one that's actually to blame and he got duped like everybody else. So it doesn't necessarily for sure mean that it's bad. But if they have any negative inference of Balwani based on the documentary or the show, then defense lawyers are going to really try to dig into that to find a cause challenge. If they do already come in saying, a lot of times I would put in the jury questionnaire, will this make your ability to be fair, change your ability to be fair and impartial? And if they say yes, it's going to affect their ability to be fair and impartial, then they are a lot more likely to be struck for cause.
Sure. And I think the lawyers may ask a question similar to, like, if you had to go to jury deliberations right now, what would your verdict be? And a lot of these guys may say guilty because of what they've seen, but they haven't actually got any evidence yet.
Frankly, even I don't know is the wrong answer. It should be not guilty because you have no evidence, meaning the government did not prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. All right, let's see here. Judge asks all the questions in federal cases. The majority of times, yes. Sometimes they'll let lawyers ask, but talk about how we can submit questions, but what happens when we submit prospective questions that we want the judge to ask the jury that we ask in state cases in jury selection?
Here's what winds up happening. In federal court, the federal judge is the ruler of that kingdom, and they can do whatever they want. Have I been in federal cases where I've been allowed to ask questions? Yes. But the majority of the time, the courts ask you to provide a series of questions. The court reviews them and decides what question he or she wants to ask the jury pool. And it's random. Normally, the judge, when the voir dire questions are done, will come back to the lawyer and say, is there anything anybody else wants to talk about? And you can throw your 10 cents. And if the judge thinks it's reasonable, the judge will inquire. If the judge doesn't think it's reasonable, oh well.
And you just don't get to ask that question.
It's done.
But it is important to kind of submit these questions. If you have a situation like R. Kelly, you can point back and say, we asked the judge to ask these questions and they refused. So that could be another issue for appeal. As always, criminal defense lawyers are thinking about that. Mark Tompkins says, if I was Sunny, I wouldn't want anyone who's seen the show on my jury. So there is a different, he's saying he is so creepy. I do think there's a bit of that in the show. Yeah. So how does it affect, if you're saying like, okay, I don't want anybody on the show. Sorry, I don't want anybody that's seen the show on the jury. So taking this a step further, anybody who's even heard about Theranos, heard about Elizabeth Holmes, heard about Sunny Balwani, heard about Holmes's verdict, maybe even, you can also craft questions for that.
Absolutely.
Right? And you would focus on that as well.
Of course. And you're talking about a jury, remember, in Southern California, where all of this played out. You've had all of this press focused on Elizabeth Holmes, but at the end of the day, it's the same trial. It's 2 days worth of meetings with the lawyers and the judge just to determine what the questionnaire should be. to me is very telling. I don't think I've heard of something like that ever, frankly.
The documentary portrays Balwani as a bully, which was part of her defense. I've never understood her attorney's connection between her deceiving people about the tech and Balwani being an arse.
Well, I think the issue is that her testimony was that he had such a hold on me psychologically and emotionally that I would do things because I knew that's what Sonny would want me to do. That was kind of the story she was playing. I don't know. Again, I don't know if the jury bought it. They did get a bunch of not guilties. It's true.
All right. Does Sonny investing $20 million help his defense? Holmes had no skin in the game. Not true. She did. She actually had more skin in the game than he did by percentage. Pretty sure he ended up losing money in this whole thing.
All right. So here is the answer to that question. Again, this is Hollywood. Sonny Balwani did not invest $20 million. He actually invests 13 over the course of time. That $13 million is not necessarily tied to him becoming COO. That's the drama portion. But I think it helps that Sonny Balwani is not in this company day one. I think it helps that he comes on board to be chief operating officer. And from that point forward, I don't think most people believe this is fraud. The question is going to turn on at what point does Sonny recognize, oh my goodness, we cannot actually perform the test we're about to tell human beings that we can do. That's going to be the question. How much did he know and when did he know it?
I think to answer your question, from my opinion, even if it's not $20 million, I think that does help his defense that he put his own real money behind it and did try to do this and come in kind of later on that maybe he also got duped. As far as, she's concerned, maybe she knew the whole time it was a fraud and she was just pumping it for money. But she did have skin in the game, right? Her college tuition was like every penny to her name.
Well, I mean, it's a lot. She put $30,000 or $40,000. That was her next semester college tuition into this to start the business. She, between her friends and family, have $6 million day one, not counting the rest of the money they invested, into the company.
So I think I am interested to hear how this jury selection process goes specifically with the Balwani case because of this show. So go ahead.
I was going to say, I would not be surprised if the impact of this show and other media comes to a point where they don't have enough jurors to seat a jury and they have to continue it.
We could even have a mistrial potentially because we can't pick a jury. So that is something we'll keep an eye on and look forward to. Pete will keep doing breakdowns of the show and of the Balwani trial. Every week we'll talk about that. And again, we've got a couple videos next week that'll focus on the show. We're not going to hit the Balwani trial until the following week after spring break, but always let us know the questions and the comments below and hit the like button if you are here for the Elizabeth Holmes conversation and the Balwani trial.
Thanks for watching this episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you like this content, please share it with your friends. Make sure you subscribe to our page and like our videos. If you want some interaction, get in the comments and we'll be sure to get back to you. If you want to know any more information about our firm or this page, you can find out in the description or visit tragoslaw.com. We post multiple times throughout the week, so make sure you hit that bell so you can get the notification and not miss out on the next episode.